Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Bozeman, and thank you, Undersecretary Dean, for being here today and for your testimony. The Department of Defense recently updated its statistics on military eligibility, which show that unbelievably 77% of young people, excuse me, age 17 to 24 are ineligible to serve in the military, and the leading disqualifier for service is obesity. This is a grave national security concern, and we really do have to do better to achieve those healthy outcomes for our young people. So included in the 2018 Farm Bill was a program that I had championed. It's the Healthy Fluid Milk Incentives Program. The 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans had noted that 90% of Americans do not meet the U.S. recommended dairy consumption. Do you support this approach of encouraging SNAP households to purchase healthy but under-consumed foods such as milk and also other nutrient-dense dairy products like cheese and yogurt to remind people of the nutritional value?
Yes, Senator, and we're very pleased with the progress that we've been making on the Healthy Fluid Milk Incentives Program. It's recently been awarded to a new contractor, Auburn, and they're making great progress. And we hope to learn quite a bit of how what they're incentivizing, and then the details of how it works at the register. We feel like there's some stickiness, and if we can pull those two things together, ideally, we can take lessons learned there for future work.
Very good. It's something that I'm continuing to work on for this upcoming Farm Bill, and of course, to help alleviate some of the concerns coming from DOD and obesity that's rampant with our youth. So I want to tag on a little bit with what the ranking member was saying. A lot of us are very shocked at the CBO score that came out, and the CBO had raised his cost estimate for SNAP by $93 billion over the next 10 years. And I do believe it's important that we're providing critical assistance to those citizens that are most vulnerable. But we also have an obligation to ensure that these federal funds are not abused and that they're not taken advantage of. And we have seen just a shocking level of fraud throughout the SNAP program. So as we're considering ways to cut back governmental spending, we do have to maintain program integrity and carefully analyze both recipient and retailer trafficking and fraud. What regulatory safeguards can we provide to prevent fraud and ensure that the government funds are utilized for the truest intentions of the SNAP program?
Well, Senator, let me just say the Secretary and myself and Administrator Long share your commitment to nutrition security, because it is in fact national security. And I think the first pathway there is to make sure all of our benefits are offering meaningful support that meets the need, which is why we are making some of the critical changes in SNAP, WIC, and school meals. So just wanted to flag back on that. But you're absolutely right that stewarding the program with integrity is a core goal, both in the Act, obviously for this committee, and for USDA. The appropriations that we received both in 22 and 23 actually provided a significant increase in staffing for FNS resources that had fallen to a historic low while our programs had gotten larger, while many more stores had joined the program. So we just needed more capacity in order to oversee the programs with, I think, the intention and direction that you're discussing. We'll continue to do that, and happy to loop back with you if we identify an area where we need more resource or authority.
That's good, because we want to make sure that those dollars are being used for those families that truly do need this. Another area that I'm concerned about is that able-bodied adults without dependents make up more than 10% of the households who receive SNAP benefits. What are your beliefs about the ability of these individuals to work 20 hours a week, given that there are 2 jobs available for every person seeking jobs out there?
Well, the group that you talk about, known sometimes in our program as ABODs, or the childless adults, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when the public health emergency ends in May, we will see Congress. I'm sorry. Let me step back. Congress temporarily suspended the work requirement that applies to that population during the public health emergency. So that policy will be changing in May when the public health emergency ends. So just wanted to, and as a result of the time limit being suspended, that population's participation in the program did grow. What we know about that requirement, which, and I think was originally set up and intended to support work, to promote work, it's not having that result. There are multiple studies that show that it does not result in increasing employment, and in fact results in increasing food hardship amongst the group. So as designed, it's not working. And the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, the strategy document called on Congress to reevaluate and take a look at that rule to see if it could be reconfigured to meet its intended purpose, which is to support and promote work, not increase food insecurity.
Yes, I appreciate that answer, and we do need to get back to getting those able-bodied adults off of the program and focusing again on the families that truly do need this assistance. We're under extreme constraints with our budget and appropriations, and we need to find a way to make sure that those dollars are going as far as we can with the people that actually need those assistance and programs. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
President Joe Biden is now threatening to veto a piece of legislation which would lower energy costs for Americans. This administration has become so beholden to the far left. All of these Green New Deal climate ideologists and extremists. And what they are so fixated on in this administration is making sure that everybody is driving an electric vehicle. An electric vehicle, folks. Think about it. Where do the batteries for those electric vehicles come from? They come from China. So what the administration is doing is saying we should be more reliant upon China and the batteries that require child and slave labor to produce. Instead of looking inward at the abundant resources that we have domestically, he continues as president to look outward and relying on our adversaries. But what I can say, coming from Iowa, we have a lot of really great resources that are readily available. They're abundant and they are cheaper. What am I talking about? It's biofuels. The administration knows that right now they can tap into biofuels and make it easier as we're approaching the summer driving season. And so I would encourage this administration, provide that E15 waiver. Let's allow E15 to be sold year-round, and let's do it right now, this summer, so that all of those drivers, those families that are going on vacation, if they are driving somewhere, they can pull up to a pump and they can tap into E15, providing cleaner, cheaper solutions. I had a great couple of weeks back home in Iowa, going around the state, talking about the Farm Bill and visiting with a lot of stakeholders. And of course, while I was at home is when Biden's EPA came out with their radical new Green Deal or Green New Deal, whatever they call it now, regulations that are pushing Americans towards those electric vehicles that the chair just talked about. Never mind the fact that the average American can't afford these vehicles. If you look at my hometown of Red Oak, Iowa, I maybe know of perhaps one family in the community that has an electric vehicle. And I don't even know how they charge it. But what we do know, electric vehicle batteries, they depend on minerals including lithium and cobalt. Lithium and cobalt. So let's take a look at the facts. China produces about 75% of all lithium-ion batteries that power those electric vehicles. And over 70% of the world's cobalt mining occurs in the Democratic Republic of Congo, done by child labor, children as young as 4 years old. The remainder of the cobalt primarily does come from Chinese-owned firms. And, of course, to mine all of these minerals, the Communist Party of China relies on slave labor. So all of these greenies out there that are pushing the electric vehicles, they think they have the moral high ground with these vehicles. And I'll remind you all again that we are, one, supporting the Communist Party of China with the efforts of these electrical vehicle batteries, but also supporting child and slave labor. Bottom line, Biden's hurting America with these initiatives. His out-of-touch Green New Deal agenda is increasing our U.S. reliance and on our pacing threat and on the child and slave labor. I can't say it enough. I did fight this last year when we were going through the National Defense Authorization Act to prohibit the DoD from purchasing EVs made with forced labor. And you know what? Democrats agreed, and we won that fight. This year, Republicans are redoubling our efforts to unleash American energy, not reliant upon child and slave labor, and allowing for the mining and refining process right here in the good old United States of America. So again, folks, let's stop handing our dollars to the Communist Party of China and allowing that slave and child labor to continue. Let's focus on American jobs and American energy. Folks, as we're approaching our $31 trillion of debt, we need to rethink how we are spending our hardworking taxpayer dollars. One of President Biden's policies that has been enacted recently is the forgiveness of student loans. And what President Biden is doing is transferring those student loans and those student loan debt onto the backs of hardworking Iowans and others. And I'll give a couple of examples of this. My brother did not have the pathway into college. He chose to enter the workforce straight out of high school. He is a union laborer. He's a union laborer, and yet President Biden is asking my brother, who went straight into the workforce, to pay for the student loans, hypothetically, for some man or woman who got student loans and is now working on Wall Street in a six-figure job. It's unfair. My sister went to community college. She worked her way through school to get her associate's degree. Now she's being asked to pay for someone who chose to take out a student loan and sign on that dotted line that they would repay their student loan. Now my sister is being asked, with her 2-year degree, to pay back somebody else's obligations. President Biden has to stop this. And if he won't, well, we will. This afternoon, I am really proud to be able to co-lead an effort to overturn President Biden's socialist student loan transfer program. And I hope that all of our Republicans join on this effort, and I hope that our Senate Democrats do as well. The House passed this very same measure last week in a bipartisan effort. So I hope again today that we see it pass through the United States Senate. I hope that the President will sign it into law, and it will save our hardworking taxpayers, just like my sister, just like my brother. It will save them $300 billion. All right, folks, we had a good recess. I was able to get my number of counties visited up to 75 out of the 99 counties we have in Iowa. But so far, the top issues that I keep hearing from my constituents are that costs are so much higher. because of the gas prices, the grocery prices, energy prices continue to be high. They are very, very concerned about that, and it is impacting the way they make economic decisions in their households. But meanwhile, we have President Biden and Vice President Harris that are out and about on this tour telling the American people that their economic policies are working. But folks, I don't want you to believe your lying eyes and your shrinking wallets, okay? So the reality of Bidenomics, and hopefully I have it the right way up, households are paying nearly $10,000 more every year compared to the same goods and services they had the year previously. As my colleague, Senator John Thune, also just said, rising inflation outpaced wage growth for 26 consecutive months. And then Americans are currently carrying a record amount on their credit cards. Okay, Bidenomics is not working, period. Okay, Iowans aren't buying this. The American people shouldn't be buying this. And they know that this crippling economy was caused by the Biden administration and their reckless spending. And Iowans, bottom line, folks, they are ready for a change in leadership. Well, welcome back, everybody. I'd like to say it's great to be in Washington, D.C., but I think I prefer Iowa. And for those of you that had the opportunity to come out, spend some time in Iowa, go to our great state fair, we appreciate your support. I finished up the 99-county tour while I was at home in Iowa, and it was great to get out across the state. But while I was out and about and talking to families and talking to manufacturers and other industries, it was abundantly clear that Iowans are very, very frustrated with the state of the economy. And it really didn't matter what industry or what location I was in. They are frustrated. They're frustrated with this administration. They're frustrated with Bidenomics. It is increasingly difficult to support their families. And it's really tough because even in my communities in southwest Iowa, where I was born, where I was raised, and where I live today, seeing the men and women that I have grown up with, they are two full-time income families now taking on additional jobs just to make ends meet. So folks, when the president is out there talking about how successful Bidenomics has been, I'm pulling the BS card on this, and I'm throwing it down because things are rough on our families. There's no getting around it. And I know sometimes you're in this bubble here in D.C., but again, folks, if you can get out to Iowa, any of our great states, you're going to see a different story when it comes to our families and our businesses. So please pay attention. So with that, Iowans are really frustrated with the taxes that they're paying to this federal government when they hear us talk about Washington, D.C., and how a number of our federal agencies' headquarter buildings are only 25% occupied. Okay, where are all of those workers? I know they're still on the payroll, right? Is COVID over? Are we able to come to work safely? I think we can do that. And yet we still have a huge number of people from this city that are telecommuting. They're teleworking. And there's no reason we should be doing that. When you have bureaucrats that are doing bubble baths during their conference calls for work, when they are golfing during business hours, and yet they're still getting paid the wages they were pre-COVID, we've got to figure this out. So I've pushed out a letter to all 24 Inspector General offices, and I'm demanding answers. So one, what are these people doing? Who has oversight of the work that is being done by these employees that are so-called teleworking? Okay, 2, what are we going to do with all this unused office space? If you're not bringing people back to work, we don't need to lease all of these buildings. We don't need all of these buildings. How much money can we save if we get rid of it? And then finally, folks, and this really gets under my skin, is that how many of these federal employees who get location-based pay, Washington, D.C. wages, who are teleworking from a lower-cost area, how many of them moved away during COVID and are still getting paid for living in Washington, D.C.? It is fraud, folks. It's fraud. So you federal employees that are out there, we're coming after you. We're coming after you. Let's do the right thing. Mr. President, while I was home in Iowa this past month, I wrapped up my annual River to River tour, where I hear directly from Iowans in all 99 counties every single year. Our government is designed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's why I'm committed to hearing from Iowans in every corner of our state and every county. It's my job to bring their voices loud and clear to Washington, where I have the honor and privilege of representing them in this great body. Now that the Senate is back in session, we have lots of unfinished business that impacts Iowans' lives, from funding the government to renewing the Farm Bill. It is here in the nation's capital that we gather to complete this work on behalf of our fellow Americans. While the Senate is once again bustling with activity, I see we even have a new class of Senate pages representing us, and they are here for duty. You've reported for duty, right? Welcome to all of our new pages. Thank you for your service as well. And the halls of Washington's bureaucracies, as we look about this city, they remain largely empty and hollow. And that, folks, is a top issue for Iowa taxpayers and folks across the county, across the country. Thousands of calls to the Department of Veterans Affairs from veterans seeking mental health services are going unanswered. Desperate travelers are waiting hours on the phone or in line, hoping to speak with someone at the State Department about passport delays that are causing vacation cancellations. Our seniors are calling the Social Security Administration and are increasingly being greeted with busy messages, waiting longer to speak to a representative, or having their calls go unanswered altogether as the agency shifts towards remote work. Frustrated Americans are being put on hold while too many federal employees are phoning it in. A manager of a VA medical center responsible for overseeing the scheduling of veterans' care appointments actually, and get this, folks, this is no joke, an overseer for scheduling of veterans' care appointments called in to a meeting from a bubble bath and even posted a selfie of it on social media with the caption, "My office for the next hour." Another VA staffer lamented, quote, "It's almost as if this employee is making a mockery of all veterans. I can sit here in my bathtub and relax, and you just have to wait." And that is exactly what is happening. The VA is still providing misleading wait times to hide the problem, but the heartbreaking stories of veterans continuing to go without urgent, medically necessary care, sometimes for months, tells the whole story. Taxpayers are also picking up the cost of maintaining mostly empty buildings in Washington. 75% or more of the office space at the headquarters of most of our federal agencies is not being used. The vacant offices beg the question, where are all of the federal employees? Only 1 out of every 3 bureaucrats is fully back in the office. 1 out of every 3, according to a recent Office of Personnel Management survey. Some said they never report to a physical office. The work locations of over 281,000 employees were redacted from data provided in response to a Freedom of Information request filed by the nonprofit group Open the Books. 281,000 employees. Well, I have some questions. Who are these folks and what exactly are they doing? Has the Biden administration been bamboozled into thinking these bureaucrats are operating out of some secret cave like Batman? I'm working to find these secret locations, which are more likely to turn out to be man caves than bat caves. In his 2022 State of the Union address, President Biden pledged that, quote, the vast majority of federal workers will once again work in person, end quote. Well, here we are, a year and a half later, and the nation's capital remains a ghost town, and government employee unions are fighting efforts to bring bureaucrats back. Folks, I am all for moving federal agencies out of Washington. That's exactly what my bill, the Swamp Act, would do. The intent is to make those creating the rules more accountable to the hardworking Iowans and Americans who have to live under them. But letting federal employees work when and where and even if they want to is having the exact opposite effect. Consider as many as 30% of Department of Health and Human Services remote employees did not appear to be working on any given day during the pandemic. And again, these are Health and Human Services remote employees. During a pandemic, you would think they would be working. They did not appear to be working, according to an internal review of employee logins to the agency's email and file systems. So, hello, federal employees, we actually can see when you are working and when you are not. Folks, remote work should not be confused with flipping through channels with a TV remote. This, folks, is not remote work. Growing up on a farm, I know what working from home really means, and it ain't easy. It's not fair to let the responsibilities of running a federal agency and the country fall on the shoulders of hardworking public servants who are showing up while others are out golfing on the taxpayer's dime. That is why I've asked the Inspector General of every single federal department and agency to determine, first, the impact of telework on the delivery and response times of services, and second, how much taxpayer money could be saved by consolidating unused office space and adjusting government salaries for those who have relocated and chosen to remain out of the office. Most of America is back to work, and it's time for burrowed bureaucrats in Washington to answer the call of duty on behalf of taxpayers, veterans, seniors, and our great nation. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield the floor.
The senator from Iowa.
Oh my gosh, what a crowd. I see a lot of gold and black out there. Okay, it took me a little bit to kind of fit in over here, but I am so grateful to be here and supporting Marionette Miller Meeks, as I call her, Mighty Triple M. She is something else, folks, right? You know that here. But anyway, we are, of course, fighting really hard in Washington, D.C. It's all about security, folks. So that's what I am going to focus on just very briefly. Number one, border security. Don't you think? Okay, we have a sovereign nation, we have borders, and we need to protect them. That's something that the Biden administration has completely forgotten. Number two, energy security. Okay, we can produce our own energy right here in the United States of America, yet President Biden leans on foreign adversaries for all of our energy production. He wants to electrify our military vehicles. What the heck? Okay, so we have a lot of folks that served in the military here, right? Raise your hands. Thank you all so much. God bless you. Okay, we got a lot of warriors in the house. I was a logistician. So I had a transportation company. We ran convoys up and down the roads from Kuwait into Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Think about it. What if we had to stop and charge up our vehicles? I don't like the thought of that. Okay, so anyway, you get where I'm going. We need energy independence here in the United States, and all of the above works for me, and I think it works for you too. So let's make it cheap, let's make it reliable, problem solved. Okay, what about national security, folks? Okay, it kind of goes along with the border too. If we don't have a safe, secure nation, the rest of us, we won't see prosperity. We won't see peace around the globe. So we want to make sure that we have a strong national security. And instead of electrifying those vehicles, President Biden, why aren't we focusing on making sure that our military is the most lethal fighting force on the face of the planet? That's what we should do, folks. So all of those issues we are working on, and you're going to hear from a lot of really incredible candidates tonight. And I am so thrilled that Iowa is the first in the nation caucus state, and we have the ability, yes, thank you, ma'am. So we have the ability to hear from all of these incredible people. We have the breadth and the depth to take on the Democrats in this next year's election. We need all of you to be engaged. So I'm asking you, get your candidate of choice and make sure that on January 15th, you are going out and expressing your opinion. So make it out to the caucuses and let's keep Iowa #1 in the nation. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
So it's been about 3.5 weeks now since I was in the Middle East and visited Israel immediately following the attacks by Hamas. And folks, you just need to make no mistake about it, that this chaos from Iranian-backed Hamas and the atrocities that they are committing, they are being fueled by Biden's appeasement strategy in the Middle East. Since President Biden took office, we have seen over $80 billion go into the pockets of the IRGC because President Biden has refused to enforce existing sanctions. on Iran. And I am planning to put an end to this, this proxies payday. I have a bipartisan bill, again, bipartisan, that cuts the red tape and it equips Homeland Security investigations and its proven record of enforcing sanctions with the resources it needs to go after and stop Tehran. So what we're planning to do, stop that money. We're going to enforce sanctions, stop the money going to Iran and the IRGC, take it out of their bloody little hands and give it to those that are victims of terrorism, and use it as well to pay down our national debt. So again, it's a bipartisan bill, and it's time we put an end to Biden's appeasement strategy and the refusal to enforce sanctions. This past weekend, I was able to go to Arizona on a border trip. So I was able to go to Yuma and speak to the sheriff, to the mayor, to a number of the city councilmen, those that represented various sectors of the human services support systems that were in that local area. And what we heard from them was not only the national security risk that they are seeing at the border, they're also seeing the human impact to their own citizens in that community. The food pantries are completely overrun. The domestic violence shelters are filled with not women and children from that area, but from those migrants that have crossed into those communities. Other shelters for homeless are occupied by migrants that are coming across the border. So we heard devastating stories. The hospital administrator painted a picture where the beds are occupied by illegal migrants into the country, and women from that community that are having babies have to go an hour and a half away because there's no room for them at the hospital where they have paid into the system, paid into taxes. They don't get support from those local entities anymore. So we see all of these constituencies, those that have worked and grown up in the Yuma area, being forced out of their own local supports because migrants have come over and have taken over all of those areas. But while we were there, we went out on the border as well, and we were able to see sections of the wall that had been erected during the Trump presidency. We saw some different type of fencing that had been erected during the Biden presidency, and then we saw unused portions of border material. Okay, so this is material that could be used to build the border. Does anybody see any irony with this picture? So I was at the border. These are the unused sections. And what's surrounding the unused sections to build the wall? It's a fence. It's a fence to protect the unused materials. They're trying to keep people out. It's rather ironic that now we're protecting unused sections of the border wall, but this president is absolutely unwilling to protect our own nation. It is a matter of national security. So folks, let's take down this fencing so we can get to this fencing and finish the wall.
I'll yield to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thanks to all of our witnesses for being here today as well. I don't typically sit on this subcommittee, so I do want to thank Chairwoman Hassan and Ranking Member Romney for allowing me to join you today. So to our witnesses, thank you all very much for your efforts to hold these federal agencies accountable, including the Small Business Administration, and to protect our American taxpayers. All the work you do really does deserve recognition, so thank you.
As a ranking member of the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, it is one of my top priorities to ensure that the federal government is addressing the more than $200 billion in COVID-19 relief that was fraudulently paid to scammers. However, the Biden SBA has discounted the full extent of fraud and instead tried to cast doubt on the legitimacy of fraud estimates made by expert investigators. This new status quo at SBA is unacceptable. This flagrant fraud within government programs, especially when it goes unpunished, hurts taxpayers and harms small businesses the most. Today, I ask for unanimous consent to include in the record my Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee report titled Small Business COVID-19 Fraud, 3 years later, State of Play.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report details SBA's refusal at every turn to fully go after fraud and recover taxpayer dollars. I recommend Congress acts immediately to increase investigators' capacity to recover taxpayer funds quickly, ensure loans are paid back, and strengthen federal government controls when dispersing funding in the future. And I would like to move into my questions, and I am going to start with Mr. Ware, and thank you so much. I appreciate your work. Your tireless efforts to hold the SBA accountable are commendable. Biden's SBA is in violation of federal law by prematurely ending active collection activities on more than $63 billion delinquent, idle, and PPP loans with balances of up to $100,000. Federal law prohibits agencies from ending collections on fraudulent, false, or misrepresented claims. When your office recommended for the SBA to not end active collections on fraudulent, false, or misrepresentative claims, the SBA did not fully agree. How many instances of fraudulent, false, or misrepresented loans are you aware of that the SBA has ended collections on?
Thank you for the question. It's a significant amount. The exact amount I could get back to you with in terms of in details. We definitely have it, but it is, and we share your concern, and they know that we share the concern relative to ending collections on those amounts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And further, your office reported that SBA did not conduct sufficient analysis to support its decision to end the collections. My Strengthening Taxpayer Recoveries Act would follow your recommendations and require the SBA to simply refer loans over to the Treasury Department so it can decide the kind of collections that are necessary for the loan. Can you tell us why it is so important that the SBA refer those delinquent loans over to Treasury?
Yes, well, first off, they have a requirement to, and that's the most
Is it the law?
It's the law.
Yes.
But secondly, I think that it sets a poor precedent. That I promise I won't get too much on my soapbox on this, but it sets a bad precedent in that it tells folks that you don't always have to pay the government back. And I think that that's central to some of the issues we saw in with Senator Scott's concerns that he brought up. It's that thought that government funds, it's the government. So the type of controls that you would have in place for a regular loan doesn't have to be in place for the government because it's the government. It's the same thing here. Less than $100,000, then I might be willing to pay it back, but if I don't, what's the penalty?
That's the truth of the matter, and that's why we're going after this. So again, I appreciate your work. And I'm going to move to Inspector General Miller. Thank you very much, sir. I am sure during this hearing there has been an extensive discussion around the unfair DOJ opinion, which hampered your ability to fully investigate all CARES Act programs. As ranking member of the Senate Small Business Committee, I would like to see SIGPER fully in the fight on small business fraud. We need to take your already existing skilled investigators with the SBA IG to tackle the more than $200 billion worth of small business fraud. My bill would extend the SIGPER and make clear we need as many folks across our government to help claw back funds. How would restoring the SIGPERS authorities contribute to recovery efforts for the unprecedented scale of fraud within the SBA's pandemic programs?
Well, I think we could contribute a lot. We stand ready, able, and willing to assist General Weir in the fight against fraud in those programs. And we have a number of very experienced prosecutors. Senator Scott mentioned CRF. That was originally one of my initiatives when I became SIGPER. And I recruited very experienced prosecutors. For example, the chief of the fraud section at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia had been chief of the fraud section for a decade. He has 35 years experience prosecuting fraud cases. And so he is now part of our office. And I have a number of experienced federal prosecutors on staff because I think I'm old-fashioned enough. I'm a former federal prosecutor too. I'm old-fashioned enough to think the answer is criminal prosecution. That will deter others from taking advantage of these programs. And we have had a lot of success with criminal prosecution and getting indictments. And even in the CRF, we had a number of open cases, some accepted at U.S. attorneys' offices. We had one involving Stonecrest, Georgia. The mayor, we had to pull out after the Department of Justice says you don't have jurisdiction in that area. The FBI took over the case. The mayor of Stonecrest, Georgia, pleaded guilty. And so I think we could contribute a lot in a lot of areas, but specifically, we are happy doing the Main Street Lending Program and the direct loans from Treasury, and I think we're doing a great job. I would be happy to, under the leadership of General Weir, subordinate to him, assisting with PPP cases. We do PPP cases through the PRAC task force, and General Horowitz has highlighted one of the cases we did recently down in Texas. It's the largest, I think it's the largest PPP case that the task force is doing, and that's in his written testimony. And we led that investigation as well. So we're happy, we're able and willing and eager to jump in and do these cases. That is what excites the people in my office and me.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate the time as well. To our chair and our ranking member, thank you very much for allowing me to join in. And thanks to all of our witnesses for the great work that you do for our agencies. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Ernst. And I will just note that one of the issues that this all raises is how do we make sure...
Before I get into my other comments, I just want to remind everybody that this Saturday is the Army-Navy football game, also known as America's Game. And one of my favorite posts, and I'll repeat it because I think it's worth repeating, is that every one of those young men that will be playing out on that field in Gillette Stadium, those midshipmen and those cadets, every last one of them, they are willing to die for every last one of us that will be watching the game on Saturday. So let's not forget them as they play America's Game. Okay, and you don't have to wonder what side I'm on either. Go Army, beat Navy. But anyway, while it's not the night before Christmas quite yet, there's not a creature stirring, not even a mouse, in the halls across this city. So COVID temporarily shut down a lot of our agencies here in Washington, D.C., closed all those federal buildings 4 years ago. But today, not a single agency has an occupancy rate of even 50%. That's abysmal. So the Biden administration really doesn't want the public to see the naughty list of no-shows, but I'm going to show you it today. And this is information that we actually did get through a request with the Biden administration. So here is our naughty list of no-shows. Okay, topping the list, HUD and Social Security Administration, they are using just 7% of their office space. Buying and renting, of course, is a whole lot more expensive. Okay, my staff wrote that, but I thought it was good. And but no one's home at HUD. Okay, take a look at that, folks. COVID's been over for years. Where are the workers? And if we're not going to fill up, we're not going to go actually work within these agencies, then maybe we need to get rid of this space, because it does cost a lot to rent these buildings in Washington, D.C. or own them. So if we're not going to bring workers back, folks, let's get rid of this space. It's costing our taxpayers a lot of money. So again, proposal, if we're not going to use it, let's lose it. Okay, naughty list. Thank you.